Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's workshop. My name is Michelle Jones, and some of you know me from other parts of Full Plate Living, and I am so excited to be here with all of you today. I see some of you have already found the chat. Go ahead and tell us hello. Maybe tell us where you're from, where you're joining us from. And today's workshop is going to be really fascinating. I'm actually very excited. We get to join Lauren Chandler in her kitchen. Lauren Chandler has taught plant forward cooking to businesses, unions, and nonprofits in public venues and to private clients for more than 2 decades. She graduated from the National Gourmet Institute of Health and Culinary Arts, but learned as much kitchen hopping around the globe and cooking in restaurants as she did in school. As an inaugural faculty in the graduate level nutrition program at the National University of Natural Medicine, she developed and taught culinary classes for 5 years. Additionally, she's a recipe developer and a volunteer for hunger relief organizations, including the Blanchett House, World Kitchen, Central Kitchen, and Providence Milwaukee Hospital Community Teaching Kitchen. Lauren's cooking emphasizes seasonal whole foods and demonstrates that you don't have to sacrifice flavor or fun to eat well. To learn more about Lauren's offerings and to connect with her to teach at your organization, visit laurenchandlercooks.com. And Amy's going to go ahead and put that link in the chat for us so you can go ahead and go to Lauren's website. Well, hi, Lauren. We're so glad to have you here with us today. And I look forward to learning about your recipe.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to hop off and let you take over.
All right, great. Thank you. So we're going to build our own recipes today. I love this style of cooking where we've got a template. It's a formula. I want you to be able to look at any recipe and feel inspired to make it your own. Thinking of it as grammar, because if you understand the parts of speech, the different ingredients and what purpose they play in the recipe, then you can understand if it's essential for the recipe, if you can substitute it, or if so, what can you substitute with? Or if you can just let it go and continue making something without that particular part of speech or ingredient. So think about noun for noun, fruit for fruit, vegetable for vegetable, herb for herb. So we're going to use cabbage today as one of our main ingredients. I love using cabbage because it's so versatile. You can do so many things with it: sauteing, roasting, broiling, you can have it raw, you can braise it. And it lasts so long in the fridge, and it's year round. It grows year round. And it goes with so many different things. I think about what grows together goes together. And cabbage grows in many different parts of the world, and it goes with those ingredients. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I want to get this into the oven. And you can use any kind of cabbage here. I'm going to make a few different versions of we're using the same ingredients in different ways. So we're going to use this cabbage, we're going to broil it and also use it raw. And we're going to use black beans. They're already cooked, or you can just take them right out of the can. And I'm also going to roast those to give them a little crunch. And so we're going to just mix and match the different techniques. And I'm just taking this layer off, this outer layer, and I want to show you the way that I love to hold a knife. And if you hold a knife a certain way and it works for you, great, go for it. I like to give people tips so that they have more ease and efficiency in the kitchen, just so you have less time in there if you're busy and don't want to be in there for a long time. So if you're comfortable with the knife, you can chop a little faster and it's still safe. So I see people often holding their knife like this, which is a little bit wobbly. Same with this. If your finger's on there, it can definitely slip, and that's unsafe, of course. So I like to hold like this. I pinch between my thumb and my forefinger at the bottom of the blade, and then I wrap my 3 fingers around the handle. This way I have a lot of control and leverage. This is where there's the most amount of metal. It's the heaviest part of the knife too. And this is often where we're going to focus. This is a big ingredient, so we're can use the whole blade, but oftentimes when we're using something smaller, this is exactly where we're going to be chopping, where there's the heaviest part and the most leverage. So that's important. Also having a sharp knife. If you have a dull knife, it can just kind of like bounce right off the skin of the mango and you can cut yourself. So a sharp knife is always good. We're going to just trim the end of the cabbage off. It's looking a little funky. And then we're going to cut it in half. And I can see nature provides this ridge here. So we can see that is halfway. So I'm going to kind of get it started there. And then I'm going to flip it so that I have more of a flat surface to work with and cut it right in half. And now we always want to get to a flat surface so that it's, again, not wobbly and more stable. And I'm going to cut right here through the core, but we're going to eat the core. So we're going to leave it intact, but just cut these wedges like this. And we're going to cut them a little bit on the thinner side, and they'll be beautiful with all these other ingredients on it. You could serve it on a nice platter if you're making food for a lot of people, or just couple slices on your plate. So it's really helpful, again, to have a nice grip here when we're wrestling with something like a big hearty ingredient like cabbage. So I have my oven on broil, and people often forget about the broiler. I love it. It's really quick to cook. It's basically an upside down grill. And so you turn it on and it's on. There's no preheating involved. So I'm going to just lay these flat here. And then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, and you can use whatever spices you want. So a little salt here. And the flavors that we're using today, these ingredients, when we're using whole foods and lots of fresh herbs and good vegetables and fruits, there's so much flavor that if you're concerned about salt, definitely leave it out. Everything's going to taste so good. You're not going to miss it. I mean, you would taste the difference if it was side by side, but otherwise you're going to have a ton of flavor. We don't need to use a ton of olive oil here, just 1 to 2 tablespoons. And we just want to coat the cabbage. And I'm going to use my hands. I always like to use my hands when I'm cooking because it really gets into the nooks and crannies. So this way I know that it's completely coated. And there are a few pieces here that are strays, and those are going to cook faster. I'm going to just put them on top of the cabbage slices so that they don't burn. And just make sure that these are really nicely coated, and then we'll put them under the broiler. Now, if they fall apart a little bit, that's okay. But if you keep them intact like this, these wedges, it's less likely to burn because they're not thin, just like single leaves. Instead, it's like a whole, it's a whole hearty wedge. So I've got my broiler on. Oh, before I forget, I also we're going to use lime here, and we're going to broil the lime. And what that's going to do is make it juicier. You're going to get more juice out of it because it's going to like steam from the inside out. So I'm just going to plop these down on the baking sheet and put it right here in the oven. And I'll set my timer. I'll set it for 3 minutes. I always like to be on the safe side. Hopefully that'll be good. And then we can just flip them over. Once we just want to see that they are starting to get like a brighter green and like a little bit translucent and a little bit of browning around the edges. And then we'll flip them over and put it back in the oven and get the other side. So a little bit about the other ingredients we're using. We've got black beans and mango, pepitas and cilantro, some red onion, and some smoked paprika. These are all, like, if you think about, I said, what grows together goes together. So cabbage is so versatile and grows so many different places. We're taking this in this direction, which is South America, or I would say Mexico, Central America, places that are going to be growing these foods. And then if we wanted to, we could take it to India, because cabbage grows in India. And if we were to do that, we could still use lime, but maybe we wouldn't use pepitas. Maybe we would use cashews, or we would use chickpeas. And maybe we don't use the cabbage. Instead, we use cauliflower, because it's another hard vegetable that serves the same purpose. Did you have a question, Michelle?
I do. I have a really quick question that keeps popping up about the broiler. First of all, is are you boiling on high or on low?
High, and it's at the top rack of the oven.
Awesome. Top rack, high. And then if you don't have a boiling option, what else can you do instead? Like, how high of a temperature in an oven would you go with?
I would go with like 450.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Good questions. Perfect. And in the recipe, it's going to say, and you'll receive that.
Perfect. And then does it matter what order you put the salt and the oil on?
Doesn't. Nope.
Okay. Excellent.
And, one thing that I would consider too, I'm coming from a bit of a chefy background, and it's hard to break those habits working in restaurants. I sprinkled the salt on, pepper on, put it in the oven. But if you really are watching your salt but are okay using a little bit, add the salt at the end, because then you'll taste it more on your tongue. And even if you use a little flaky salt that's bigger crystal, that's going to be like just you'll just taste it more. So consider that.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to pop off again.
Sure thing. So what grows together goes together. I wanted to mention seasonal and regional. So if we think about summertime, we know that tomatoes are growing, basil. We've got tomato, we've got basil, we've got what else goes with those ingredients? Let's say olives, right? Garlic. Right, I'm going to take this out. And you can see it's starting to brown around the edges here. That's what we're looking for. You see that there? So it's a little bit premature, but I'm going to flip this over just for the sake of our time. And I'm using tongs, but you could definitely use a spatula. And some of these pieces are going rogue here. They're coming off, but that's okay. They're already cooked, and we'll just remove them, and they'll be ready for us when everything else is ready. And now the limes, they're already super juicy. They're like dripping. So I'm also going to take those off. Put this back in for a few minutes, and then we'll be good. Okay, as I was saying, tomato, basil, lemon, olives. We're talking Mediterranean here. Now, would you want coconut with that? Personally, I think coconuts and olives don't really go. If you like it, there are no rules. Like you like it, go for it. But I would say coconut, let's stick with places where coconuts grow. That's going to be really good with lime. That's going to be really good with cashews. So that's a nice guideline to consider. And also regionally, seasonally too. So in the summer, we got tomato and basil growing next to each other. In the colder months, we have winter squashes and rosemary. We have hardier herbs and root vegetables, and those go very well together. You think Thanksgiving, you're rarely going to have, your leafy herbs like basil with, you can have it, sure, but what grows together goes together. Okay, so next up, I want to get my onion going. People always ask me how to chop an onion. So I always try to get an onion into my classes. And what I'm going to do, if we have this coming out of the ground, we've got the root underneath, and here's the top coming up like this. We're going to keep that root intact and trim off the top. Now we have a nice flat surface. And let me check on the cabbage. We've got a nice flat surface here so that we can slice in half. and remove that skin. And for this particular dish, it's nice to have the onion in here, but if you didn't have onion, and you had garlic, you could use garlic. You could use red onion or white onion or yellow onion or green onion or no onion. Is it essential to this dish? No, it adds some nice flavor, but you don't have to use it. Okay, let me get this fan going. And you can see how it's starting again, like we're getting all this nice color on here. Hopefully you can see that. It's getting soft and tender and buttery, and it's just gorgeous. It's turning that brighter green. And now what we can do is we can take this lime that's been cooked, and so much juice comes out of that. And I will say that this is one of those ways of preparing cabbage that people go nuts for. If they don't think they like cabbage and then they try this, they realize that they do. It's almost buttery, and it's one of those that keeps well in the fridge and can go with all sorts of things. You can put it in tacos. You can do so much with it. Okay, I'm gonna set that aside while we continue with our onion. And now that we have our flat surface, nature already worked with us, and nature gave us this rainbow cut in this direction. So we're just gonna cut in this direction to dice this. And we're gonna go up to the root, but not through it. Because if we went through the root, then when we cut this way, we'll be chasing all these pieces around the cutting board, which is fine, but to save time, this stays intact and we just chop this way. And when it starts to get wobbly, just flip it on its side and keep on going. And what we're gonna do is pickle these, just do a real, very, very quick, easy pickle. And just for the sake of it, I'm gonna use this lime. Oh, and also if you wanted to use more lime flavor, but you didn't want such strong acidity from the lime, you can use a rasp. I'm not crazy about a lot of kitchen tools, but I do use this a lot for ginger and garlic and zest. So you could make sure it's washed and just go ahead and get some zest on there. And anyhow, I'm just showing you this. I would have used the other lime, and you can do that, but since I have extra lime, I'm just going to use this. I also like to use a fork. That gets a lot of the juice out, just sticking it right there in the middle. I'm using my hand rather than a juicer, though juicers are great too. And this is just an extra step. I don't even mention this in the handout that you're going to get. But I personally don't love the sharpness of red onion. And just by letting it hang out for 5 to 10 minutes in a little bit of lime or lemon or vinegar, it's going to just dull it and just make it less biting. You could also just rinse it in cold water. That's going to have a similar impact, but in terms of the dulling of the flavor, but it won't pickle it. It won't bring that extra color, flavor, and also color. It makes it, the longer you let it sit, the like brighter pink it gets. And I think it's really beautiful seeing how these turn this like real fuchsia color. So I'll set that aside. And next we're going to get our beans going. So for the beans, I already rinsed and drained these beans from the can. Can definitely cook them, but it's nice in a pinch to have canned beans or packages of cooked beans on hand. And we know that they're so high in fiber, really good protein source. And I was thinking last night when I was preparing for this class, of course I do this for work, so I have a very well-stocked pantry. And up here, all these ingredients, minus these pumpkin seeds, but all of these are whole grains and legumes, beans, lentils, And I thought, wow, these are all high fiber foods. And I could swap these ingredients out and use any of those instead of the beans. And then you change the proportions. So, maybe we have a lot of cabbage and just a handful of beans, or maybe we have lots of beans and just a little bit of cabbage. So once you have this template, you can swap in terms of proportions, but also ingredients. So there's just so much you can do. And if you wanted to go in a different direction and use white beans instead of black beans or chickpeas, and then think about what grows together goes together. And you don't have to have such a well-stocked pantry. If you just have a few different things that inspire you, so that you have some choices and can get creative, some spices. And all right, so for these beans, I dried them really well because we're gonna put them in the oven to crunch them up, get them nice and crispy. And so that's why they're on this dish towel. You can just pat them dry. I let them air dry because I had some extra time. But the reason that we do that is we want them to crunch up. We don't want them to steam, right? And if they're wet, they're going to steam. And eventually they'll get crunchy, but it's just going to take a longer time. And this way, we'll just put it right in the oven. I'm going to put the oven on to, let's put it on 400. And in the recipe, I might have said 400, I might have said 425, but just keep your eye on it and taste them as you go. I would say 10 minutes is a pretty good place to stop. I like the texture that way. If you want to go much crunchier, it doesn't take long for them to dry out, and go about 15 minutes. And you could think about, the size of the bean. If you're using lentils, of course, it's going to be much quicker because they're smaller. And if you're using chickpeas, it's going to take longer because they're larger. So I got a little bit of salt and pepper on here, and just a little bit of olive oil too to coat. And I'm going to add some sweet smoked paprika, which brings in a really nice smoky flavor. And I could also just add this to the dish at the end. So I'm, again, using my hands to really make sure that every bean gets equal treatment and coated with the spices and the olive oil. And we'll get these in the oven. Now the broiler is great because it acts as a preheat function. So there's that. And now let's move on to our mango. So mango full of vitamin C, it's so good for you. If you, in terms of cutting it, if you see the end here, you know that that's the center of the pit. So you can find where the pit is and then just slice both, they call them cheeks, slice off both cheeks. And from here, you can score it. And I would recommend not holding it in your hand to do this. However, if you are set on doing it that way, just use the back of your knife. Same thing for avocado, because then you're not at risk of cutting your hand. I just like to score it on the cutting board, and I'm cutting it into cubes. Something else to take into consideration is shape when you're creating a dish. Do we want things to be cubed, or do we want them to be long and thin? The size, do we want bigger chunks of mango and smaller pieces of cabbage? So you can really switch it up, and it's different in your mouth. It's different on your tongue, depending on shape and size, and adding different textures. We're putting some pepitas in here for crunch. You could also, think about using like mustard seeds, toasted mustard, brown mustard seeds in some of your dishes. I would say more in the Indian realm. Oh, you know what I want to show you? So yeah, toasted brown mustard seeds are great just in the skillet, dry skillet, and they start to pop and turn gray, and they taste so good. They just give this little extra kick. It's not a hot kick. It's just like a nice spice. And that's something that is bringing in a lot of flavor without, adding a lot of fat. So we've got our cheek here. Pretend that this is not already cut and it's just a whole half. You can just take a glass. Kids love doing this, by the way, and take it out that way. So that's kind of a fun little thing to do. And then we'll also remove our skin over here. So I'm gonna just set my timer here. Take off the skin of the mango, and oh, I can't wait. Peach season is coming up. We could make this with peaches. We can make this with tomato. We're just thinking about, for this component, for this part of speech, it's like, the sweeter, juicy ingredient. And it also brings in some acidity. I mentioned acidity with the lime, and I think about creating dishes that have a balance. I want harmony. So if we're talking music, this is like a musical scale, and we're talking high notes and low notes. So we've got our high note, which is the mangoes on the high side, about the lime, because it gets you right here. It's way up here. And lemon would be up here, vinegar. And a lower note is going to be the richer ingredients, the olive oil, for example. And you want to balance them out. Think about fish and chips. Fish and chips is always served with tartar sauce or lemon, and that's to cut it, so to really balance it out. So same thing when you're creating any dish, to make sure you've got your high notes and low notes. And the other element of balance is, for example, with your flavors, bitter and sweet, right? If we're using something like radicchio, which is, got this off screen here, we're using this, then it's on the bitter side. So you can cut the bitterness by soaking it in some ice water after you chop it up. But you can also pair it with something sweeter, like a balsamic vinegar, or like apple. So just thinking about balance and harmony. So let's set aside our mango. And then we can work on our herbs. We'll get the cilantro ready. But first I'm going to give these onions a quick stir. You can see, I hope you can see that they're already starting to get brighter in color. And now we'll move on to the herbs. So the cilantro, and if you don't like cilantro, you could use a different herb. I actually think mint would be really nice in here. So the way that I like to wash my leafy herbs like this, also dark leafy greens like spinach or kale, I'll fill up a bowl of water, cold water, and I'll submerge all of the leaves and swish around and lift them out and see if there's any dirt on the bottom. And if there is, I'll dump out the water and I'll rinse out the bowl to make sure all the dirt is gone. And I have seen folks take the ingredient and then dump the water out like this, but then you're pouring the dirt back on. So make sure to remove it all the way. Then once you have your clean bowl, fill it up with cold water again, put it back in, swish, lift it out. Keep doing that until you have no more dirt at the bottom. And then I like to store this in water in a jar in the door of my fridge, not on a shelf because it's easier to tip over. And then we're not going to need to use all of this, but I'll use about half of it. And the stems are really tender, so I will use the stems and the leaves. There's no reason to throw those out. Similarly to the cabbage, I really like to use the whole ingredient. And when you get cauliflower, use those leaves. That whole casing that the cauliflower head sits in, I actually like the better part, that part. I like the leaves that are holding it more than the florets. So know that you can eat all of that. And when I'm chopping these herbs, I'm bending, you can see, I'm kind of folding them over each other. So instead of having it be so many pieces to chop, it's like it's one ingredient. And again, pinching the blade and chopping it and moving my fingers back and doing this rocking motion, which at first felt really awkward when I learned that when I was working in a restaurant, but slowly and surely you get it. Just leaving the tip of your cutting board, of your knife on the cutting board and pushing forward, chopping with that bottom part of the knife. And then you bear claw. You tuck your fingers under, tuck your thumb behind your fingers, and you can use your fingers as a guide and just inch back. Start that very slowly, and over time you'll be able to go faster. Okay, so we've got our cilantro. Oh, note to self, instead of scraping this way, which dulls your blade, you can use the back of your blade. So I'll set that cilantro aside. And next up, we are going to, we meaning me, I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. And clean off the cutting board. It's always good to have a nice clean workspace. Again, really for safety. If you've got all these things on your cutting board and scraps, and then you're just chopping over here, it's just more likely you're going to cut yourself if you're crammed. Okay, so I'm going to cut some of this cabbage, the raw cabbage, and make it nice and fine, finely shred here. And we'll use, let's say we'll use about this much. That should do it. And I'm just going to chop it pretty fine, kind of like I'm making a coleslaw. And we'll add it into a bowl with all these ingredients. And then this is the hard part, is once we make all these different versions, which to eat first. They're all so good. And a little goes a long way with cabbage. I mean, that made so much and we still have a lot of cabbage left. So it's also a very cost-effective ingredient. So that should be just fine right there. And now I'm going to add some black beans. And these black beans, again, were just drained. I didn't put them in the oven. But speaking of the ones in the oven, I will give these a shake and bring it up to the camera. Hopefully you can see that they're almost starting to pop open. Give them a shake, or you can give them a stir. I'm going to put them back in for just another couple minutes. 5, let's say 5. Now we've got our mango. Let's add a little mango here. And some of our onion with a little bit of lime juice. And some pepitas. And these I just toasted in a skillet, a dry skillet, over a medium-low heat. And they'll just start to turn golden brown and pop a little bit. So make sure that you have a container close by to transfer them. Adding a little salt, a little pepper, and a little olive oil. Now this is something too, you could use avocado. Avocado would be really nice in here. Adding a little bit of that smoked paprika and cilantro. And let's plate this right up. Using my hands. We're lucky enough to have all these fingers. I'm always saying, might as well use them. You know, you could use tongs, or you could use a big spoon or 2 utensils, but if we've got 10, let's use them. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking I want a little bit more of the black beans in here. And if you wanted to, you could have the bulk of this dish be black beans, or you could have the bulk of it be your cabbage. You could also kind of make this into a salsa. you could have a lot of mango and then all these other ingredients, and it's pretty much a salsa. So it's a fun thing to play around with these templates and just get inspired. So I'll plate that all up. And then I always like to kind of garnish it with some extra cilantro, a little bit extra herbs, and some extra pepitas. And there's one version here. And then the next version, I've got the broiled cabbage. I've got the little pieces that I already pulled out of the oven. And these beautiful soft pieces. This is one of those ones that you want to pick with. You know, you can't just like leave it on the cutting board or on the sheet tray and walk by. Everybody wants their hands on it. You call all this buttery soft cabbage. So this one we can, you know, plate up. Why not this way? Where we're gonna, or actually, I'm gonna show you something that I often do, which is before I put this down, I really like to make sure that it's layered. So this has everything mixed up, but I'm gonna plate this by just putting a few of each ingredient at the bottom and then build my way up. But I, you know, when I eat something and like all the goodies are at the top, I'm like, oh, and at the end of the dish and there's like nothing to mix in with the main ingredient. So this way you kind of layer it and get to have everything. And now we'll put these guys back and let's add more mango and onion, cilantro, pepitas, black beans, and if you want to add a little spice. Again, when we think about templates, is the spice essential? No, it's still complete. It's still delicious without it. But if you want to add that smoked paprika, go for it. If you want to add a little fresh jalapeno or cayenne to bring in a little heat, you can definitely do that. But it doesn't need to be there. You could use cumin or coriander. So many different options. So these beans are done. Nice and crunchy. You can even hear them. Beans are also great because they're so versatile and so inexpensive. If you buy them canned, they're not expensive, but if you make them yourself, they're even less expensive. And lentils take no time to cook. It's like 15 minutes to 30 max, and you don't have to soak them. So that's pretty awesome. Now for this version, I will layer this up. And you can imagine having like a whole big platter, right? Where you have these wedges kind of long on a platter, and then you can just sprinkle everything down the center, say, for one example of how to plate it. And I do have some juice left in this lime that we had under the broiler. And now I wanted to mention that if you want to, you could turn the lime cut side up also. You know, I would first make it juicy, right, cut side down, and then flip it up. And what happens, I did this with a lemon earlier to show you, it gets nice and kind of caramelized. And you can squeeze that on for even more flavor. And you could also serve it with these on, if you're, you know, having a dinner party or something, you can serve it with these cut side up, and they're so beautiful. And some of the lemon juice from those got in here, so we can add that into it into our next version, because it's still going to be great with lemon. If you don't have lime, go for it with the lemon or with some vinegar. Now we've got our black beans. Oh no, you know, for this one, of course, I was going to use the ones that just came out of the oven. So we'll use our crunchy ones. Yes, they're hot. My hands can take it. And our mango. So you can see, again, just like same ingredients, different dish. And if you're someone who enjoys meat, you could also put, use a little bit of chicken here. That would be really nice. And then if you want to use a little olive oil, you can. We also already did have the olive oil on the cabbage, but it's only a few pieces of the cabbage, so that is a-okay. So that is that. And then the final version would be a combination of using shredded cabbage with your black beans that have been crunchy. Then we have all four, but I am going to set that aside because I want to show you something else. I was thinking when I opened the fridge this morning, what I have to show you an example of another version of this template. And just so happens that I have these ingredients on hand. We've got green onion, got radicchio, and I have an apple and some beets that I had cooked off, some balsamic vinegar, and hazelnuts. So this is like the same formula, right? We've got, instead of the mango, we're using apple, cabbage, radicchio, hazelnuts, pepitas, green onion, red onion, beets. You know what? I don't think we didn't have a second vegetable in here, but we can always add more vegetables. You know what? I was going to put radish in there, and I didn't. But you aren't familiar with watermelon radish. This one isn't as bright as some of them, but it's so nice and pink in the center, and that brings in a really nice color and flavor and more nutrients. So you could chop that up and put it in there. You never have too many vegetables. And then balsamic vinegar instead of the citrus. So we can chop this up. And this is like more, almost like a fall version with the apple. But radicchio is coming in now too. And apple is always available, even though it isn't growing right now. And I'm gonna grab this plate and get this going. This would be one where it would be nice to add a little bit of the toasted mustard seeds, actually. And you could also broil this. It wouldn't take long at all. It'd be even faster than the cabbage. And it's really, like I was saying, it's bitter. And so you could always make sure to match it with something sweet, like we are with the apple and the balsamic vinegar. Are there any questions coming through the chat?
Yeah, actually, we have quite a few questions that have come through. So one of the newest ones was, is the purple thing that you're cooking right now, is that purple cabbage?
It is not purple cabbage, it's radicchio, which is a part of the chicory family. And you could use purple cabbage by all means, but radicchio is, let me hold it up more closely.
Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit bitter, isn't it? It has like bitter undertones.
Exactly. It's on the bitter side. And they say bitter is better in the chicory. So yeah, it is. And that's why I'm using the apple and I'm using the balsamic vinegar, because those are sweet and they balance it out. And another way I think I mentioned is if you chop it up and then put it in ice water for about 15 minutes, that's going to help take some of the bitterness out too, if that's not your preference, if you don't love the bitterness.
Oh, that's a great tip. Yeah, sometimes it can be overwhelming for some of us, but not necessarily. And then there was another question. You mentioned high and low notes. When you're talking about those, are you talking about how sour something is?
It's not necessarily a sourness. It's more of a like an acidity, more of a brightness. It can be sour, but I don't really think of vinegars necessarily as sour. I think of lemon and lime as sour, but vinegar less so. So a high note would be something that's really brightening and acidic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So tomato juice could be a bright note then.
What could be?
Tomato juice, maybe?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right, here's another question. I'm having to substitute things for onions, garlic, leeks because of a bad food sensitivity. Can you suggest substitutions? Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So if you wanted to taste like in a similar vein, a little bit of that kind of pungency funk, asafoetida is an Indian ingredient that you can get in the spice section. Some you might, depending on what you have access to, you might need to get it online or at an Indian grocer. But it brings in that kind of a flavor. It mimics a kind of garlicky onion flavor. So you could add a dash of that. And if it's just kind of like a stronger flavor that you're looking for, consider ginger. You know, ginger is something that can provide a similar kind of background note. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Excellent. And can you spell the spice that you mentioned at first?
That's a good question. I might have to go into my spice cabinet to tell you. A-S, it might be E-O-F. F-A-T-I-D-A, something like that.
Okay, so something like that. I tried to spell it and send it in for.
Let me see if I have it right here. I do. Let's see. A-S-A. Oh, I was off. A-S-A-F-O-E-T-I-D-A.
Okay, awesome. We have shared that through. And I'll let you finish this recipe and then I'll hop on with the rest of the questions at the end.
Okay, sounds good. So I also wanted the opportunity to teach you how I like to chop an apple into slices. Getting to our flat surface. So I'm cutting one side of the core, and that way we get to a flat surface as soon as possible so it's not wobbly. And then I just keep cutting around the core. And then from here, I can chop into slices. And then if I want to dice it, I could go ahead and dice it. Again, thinking about shapes and sizes. You know, if I'm making a soup, I'm going to chop things very small so that I can get everything on the spoon. But if it's a stew, I'm going to have bigger pieces. If I want a salad where I have everything on the fork at once, I'm going to chop everything really small. But if I, want things to be bigger, then I go in that direction. I could also think about like, maybe I like a finger salad. I don't know if I love that term, but I've heard it out there. So you're using your hands. You have your romaine lettuce leaves that are big and you're eating it like this with your hands. And maybe, so instead of chopping it up, you have them whole, but then you have the other ingredients that are small so that you can make sure that you have all of those in each bite. So for this, actually, I wanted to show you for demonstration's sake, chopping that way, but I do want to make it into slices. So we're going to slice these up. And it does mean that I'm going to end up eating my salad with a fork and knife, and that's fine. It's just, they're so beautiful and I like to see them in my salad. I don't want them to be blended in as much just because I'm like, oh, I love that apple. Love the apple business. So I've got my apples, my green onion, and radicchio, and I have some beets here, some gold beets and some red beets and some hazelnuts that I already toasted. And you can toast them in an oven on medium low heat, or same in a skillet, and then chop them up. And then I don't think I want to put cilantro in. Again, do you need the herb for this template? No, not necessarily. If it adds to it, great. If not, just leave it out. On the handout that you're getting, there is one category. I have a chart for you, and there's one category for spice. And for one of the examples of this template, I just made a little note saying, like, I can't think of anything that I would want to add to this. Like, by all means, go for it if there's something you like, but there's nothing that I could think of that would enhance it. And so I just didn't put anything in for the spice category. Again, I don't want you to think, oh, you need to have something for every single category to be able to make this. So I've got this nice and thick balsamic vinegar that I really like. And we've got our olive oil. And I did use the balsamic, and that's a nice high note, and it also brings in some sweetness. But since I've got this lemon that I broiled, and I've got this like broiled lemon juice, I'm going to add some of that too. And there we go. I'm going to toss this up with my hands. Same formula, but very different flavors and textures and shapes and sizes and seasonality. I know that people are watching this from all over, and what's in season for you might not be in season for someone else. And you might have a lot of access to ingredients for little. So really being able to modify and know how to adapt a recipe is so important. Okay, so there's another version. The other thing that I wanted to mention is capers. Capers is always, not always, but when it goes, a nice little extra flavor punch. They're really strong and mighty. Okay, I'm gonna just leave those little scraps over there. I think that's a good place to stop and hear from you, Michelle, if there are any other questions.
This is amazing. I think the chat has been hopping with great conversation this whole time. People have been just enjoying this. You're such a good teacher. Those are some of the comments that I've seen, but the whole time I'm thinking the same thing. So many interesting tips. So I'm going to start the Q&A with, well, first of all, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. And if you've enjoyed this so far, go ahead and put something in the chat that you really liked about this workshop. Give us some feedback. I do want to say that it's been a pleasure. Lauren does do workshops for employer groups or anybody else who just wants to learn how to cook healthier. So once again, go to her website for more information on how to have her host something for your event if that's something that you are interested in.
Thank you.
But the first question I'm going to ask has to do with your tips. You mentioned, oh, let me see if I can find it again because it was closer towards the end. Oh, here we go. What does cooked off mean? You mentioned that the beets were cooked off. What does that mean?
Cooked.
Cooked. That was simple and easy and excellent. I think people in the chat and we were overcomplicating it. All right. Could you spray beans and cabbage with olive oil or avocado spray?
I believe you can. You know, I haven't tried it, mostly because I'm still like in my restaurant mind of tossing with my hands and drizzling, but I don't see why you couldn't. I would say go for it. And, you know, you can always try it with a little bit, you know, just like one slice of cabbage and do a tester so you don't waste it if it doesn't work out. But I think that would be just fine.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, I have done it before. You have to just make sure you don't have as much moisture sometimes when you do that. So just kind of pay attention to, like you said, it can dry out some of the things you're baking. Okay. When cooking dried beans, do you brine them first overnight? I've always been afraid using salt would make beans tough, but recently tried and the bean texture was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, if it worked for you, great. That sounds like you just answered your own question. I tend to soak them overnight or during the day, and then I cook them closer to dinner time. And I tend to just soak them in water and then add salt towards the end of cooking time. But there are a lot of different techniques out there. I know Rancho Gordo out of California, they have some really great tips on their website if you're interested in digging a little deeper into cooking beans and different ways of doing it.
Yeah, and Amy will put that link up too. We love Rancho Gordo, and they have amazing bean varieties too.
Bean Story is a new bean company too they just have gorgeous, stunning heirloom beans.
Yes, yes. Okay, do you keep your cilantro out of the refrigerator for any period of time?
I do, yeah. This has been out of the fridge for almost 3 hours now, and it's doing just fine. But I do keep it in the fridge, normally for when I'm not using it. Basil is the one that I would keep out on the counter, not refrigerate.
Oh, that's a great tip to have. So basil would stay on the counter, not in the fridge. Good to know. No wonder mine always gets all weird and gross looking. Okay, this was a very popular question in the chat. Where do you get your bowls? People like bowls.
Good question. I think I got these. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and it's a store called Kitchen Caboodle. And you could probably order them online, but I would think that other places like a Crate and Barrel or a Williams Sonoma would carry these. I really love the glass bowls, especially for teaching, because you can see into them.
It makes it much easier to see what's inside for sure. Could you use frozen mango instead of fresh mango?
You could, definitely bring it up to room temperature, and maybe chop them smaller because they tend to be on the bigger side. But the texture will be a little bit different if you use frozen mango. But mango is still going to be delicious. The other thing you could do is use your frozen mango in a vinaigrette, right? So you could let it defrost, put it in the blender with a little bit of cilantro and some of the smoked paprika, our usual suspects that we're talking about here, and use it as vinaigrette if you don't like the texture of it defrosted, but you want the flavor.
Oh, that's a great idea. Definitely. Okay, after you fried the seeds, you just keep them in a jar toasted. Is that right? And and on the counter or in the fridge. How do you keep them basically after you?
Sure. So again, I dry toast them, and you don't need to add any oil to the skillet or to the pan. And I do, because I go through them relatively quickly, I keep them, I have them in a jar out. But light and heat and oxygen are the things that will make them go rancid more quickly. Nuts, seeds, flowers, oils. So it's good to store in a dark, cool, airtight space. So I would say if you're not going to go through them quickly, or you have the space, better to keep them in the fridge or even in the freezer.
Excellent. Well, thank you for answering those. We do still have a handful of questions. I know the time is up, so I'm going to share the handout and the recipe real quick. So make sure you go to the handout tab to download these. Let's see, share now. I want to make sure that both of them are shared. So I'm going to wait for the recipe to go up, and look at that. Everybody's liking them.
Guidelines, formulas, not recipes. Take it all with a grain or two of salt.
That's true. Yes. All right. And we're going to share the handout as well. And while people are downloading those, I'm going to go ahead and hit some more questions. Okay. How do you keep your apple from turning brown after you cut it?
A little bit of lemon juice.
Lemon juice. Excellent. All right, here's a good one. Not that the others weren't good, because there's some good questions, but is there a mental checklist to go off when attempting to balance a meal? Like, should I think about the elements sour, sweet, acidic, bitter, heat?
Yes, and you don't need all of them in there, right? Like, it doesn't have to be spicy if you don't like spicy food, or you can just like have a little bit of a kick if you like. So just, and I talk about balance, unless your intention is like, I want this to like the strongest flavor here. Like, I want to make like a sour, whatever dish. There are dishes that like are named sour something or other, or spicy something or other. So in that case, that's going to be the like strongest flavor in there. But yeah, you want to think about bitter and sweet, and there's also a chance that you're not going to have any bitterness in your dish. But also like salt and sweet kind of temper each other too. So you can think about that way, and also like the richness of bringing in a little bit of fat, whether it's in the form of oil or avocado or coconut oil, that can help to balance out some of the other elements as well.
Excellent. Let's see. This person's allergic to mango. Can you recommend another fruit?
Yes, definitely. I would say definitely peach or nectarine coming into the summertime would be really nice. I think apple would be really nice. If we're sticking with the tropics, papaya. I mean, how could you go wrong with papaya? You could even toast up some coconut flakes and sprinkle those on there. Orange. I think orange would be lovely.
Yeah, it would. Such a great variety. I love that this is so, you can throw anything together, really. It's not just that one recipe. It's just an idea.
And, you know, I teach a class using different ingredients to make a soup, where it's a pureed soup, and you're using the same template, but you're using carrots for one version, you're using cauliflower for another version, you're using parsnips for another version, and then you can vary. So you have your base, and maybe it's just, you know, very simple with onion and carrot and whatever that ingredient is. But then you decide at the end, ooh, I'm going to add a little bit of toasted sesame oil and toasted sesame seeds and green onion. Or you take it in a different direction and you're going to add, well, you get the idea.
Yeah, no, I love this. It's so fascinating. I just want to have another class after this.
It just means that, like, it's infinite. You know, you look at any recipe this lens and you can take it in so many different directions.
It is. And that's what's so great about fiber foods, that there's a great variety of them, and you don't have to have so many drastic ways of cooking. It's just learning how to balance a meal, like you have been teaching us today.
All right, I've made this before with lentils. I've made it, instead of using the beans, I've used whole grains. And again, don't forget about changing the proportions. So if you want a heartier meal, just use more of the beans and less of everything else.
Yeah, that's a great idea. What's your recommendation for type of apple to use with the beet recipe? Would you want a sweet variety or a more sour variety?
I would probably go for more sweet because the radicchio being bitter. Mm-hmm. But if I wasn't using the radicchio and I was using cabbage, I would say either way is fine. The balsamic is on the sweeter side. So I would say whatever I was thinking even less about flavor when that question started and thinking more about texture. Like, I like to have the real crisp apple that just for the contrast there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question for you. And then I have a comment that got tagged as a question. So I think it must be a good one and you must need to hear it. All right. Do you ever use an air fryer for some of your roasting?
You know, I have never used an air fryer. I need to get with program. I hear people love them. So if you like it, go for it. And it's hard for me to recommend because I've never done it, but it's been recommended to me so many times that I can get on board even without trying it. It's on my list.
Yeah, I think it's a great option if you don't have, well, especially, okay, let's say that you're glamping somewhere, so not really camping, so you have a plug available. You could bring that with you if you didn't have an oven, if you're cooking.
Oh, don't get me started on the glamping food. So much you can do with just a skillet and fire.
Yes, so much. Open fires. Such delicious food. All right, Lauren. So this is from Lois. This was so informative. I love your casual way of teaching, and you make everything seem so easy. All of the dishes look delicious. I can't wait to try them. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lois. That's so kind. I'm glad you got something out of it.
Yeah, so thank you again for your time today. Thank you for all of the different dishes that you demoed for us. I think Lois's comment just resonates with all of us. So thank you again. We do have the handouts. If you haven't downloaded your handouts yet, you may want to go ahead and do that at this time. And I believe that this is the end of the workshop. Again, thank you for being with us today. Lauren, thank you for your time and energy that you have put into this workshop. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everyone.